Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Kornacki, and welcome to another edition of Way Too Early. And we can actually call this show Too Close to Call today because all eyes, of course, are on Ohio, smack in the middle of that state where a critical special election for an open house seat is still being called Too Close to Call by NBC News. Now, the Republican candidate clinging to a narrow lead there, 1,754 votes, if you want to be exact. This, though, in a solidly red district. President Trump carried this thing by 11 points back in 2016. For decades, really, generations, it's been a Republican stronghold. I got some expert guests to help me out along the way. We got Jess McIntosh, Michael Singleton, and Caitlin Huey-Burns. They will all be joining me in just a moment. A lot to talk about with them, but you watch for the boards. At least I hope you do. So let's get started. Humor me, if you will. We'll take a quick look at what happened here in the 12th District of Ohio and what is still to come, because as we say, we are saying too close to call. Take you through the math on why it's too close to call. The margin, as we say, well, I don't know if you can read this. It's very thick and very yellow. 1754. Does that even show up on TV? I'm not going to write with that anymore. You can't really read it. Can we change it on the... I changed it. Look at that. I complain on the air and they respond. That is power, folks. 1754, 1,754. That is the margin Balderson leads by. So why is it still too close to call? Two groups of votes. We are still looking at 3,435. That's the number of provisional ballots. People went to the polls. They wanted to cast a ballot. Maybe they went to the wrong precinct. They cast a ballot. It has to be verified afterwards for the vote to be counted. So we will see generally the provisional ballots, they break Democratic. So if this were to go disproportionately Democratic, would it erase a 1,754 vote lead for Balderson? Probably not. Could it cut it in half? That's certainly plausible. And then if that happens, this is what comes into play. The margin right now, Balderson over O'Connor, sits at 0.9, 50.2 to 49.3. That is a lead of 0.9 points for Balderson. If that number ends up falling under half a point, if it ends up falling under 0.5, I don't know why I'm writing over his vote total there, then you get by state law an automatic recount. So those provisional ballots, they could cut into that Balderson margin, start getting you close to that recount trigger. And the other thing, we got so many numbers here. The other one, how about this? 50-48. No, not a low-scoring basketball game. I'll add the comma, 5,048. That is the number of what they call uncounted, unreturned absentee ballots. They mailed them out to folks. They didn't have them back as of last night. Now, some people might have put them in the mail. The law in Ohio is if it's postmarked by the day before the election, then it comes in after the election, they'll still count it. Some are from military folks as well. So a certain number, we don't know how many, of that pool will also end up being counted. Certainly won't be all of them. There will be a lot of votes out there that simply aren't returned. So the odds of O'Connor actually getting ahead of Balderson in this thing, those don't look too good. But the possibility that between the provisionals, this thing ends up within half a point, and then you have that automatic recount, that is certainly plausible at this point. And so the state says they got until the 24th of August to certify this thing. If they say there's got to be a recount, probably play out just before then. And then maybe we get a winner at the end of August. 2 months later, by the way, another election, Balderson versus O'Connor. They're running against each other again in November. So, we're going to find out who the winner is, but then not much of a honeymoon there for whoever that winner is. But that is sort of the latest in Ohio. In terms of, very quickly, the story of how it ended up this way, we say this Trump plus 11 district, historically Republican district. The fact that we're even talking about it, this has been a pattern, certainly in these special elections. Basically what happened, you see the one blue area here. It's small geographically. It's packed with people. This is the big Democratic area. This place went for Hillary Clinton by almost 20 points in 2016. Last night, it went for Danny O'Connor by 31. So in the core Democratic area, in Columbus, right outside Columbus, Democrats did even better than they did in 2016 in the turnout level, the number of voters actually turning out there through the roof compared to the rest of the district. So if Democrats just looked at that, Columbus, Franklin County last night, just looking at that, they'd say, hey, that's what we need. We're going to win this thing. Why does it look like they're falling short here? Two reasons. Number one, take a look here. All these counties, you're basically looking a lot of rural areas here. These are places where Donald Trump did a lot better than Republicans have done in the past. He improved on Romney quite a bit out here. Well, Balderson didn't get a lot of turnout, but he got Trump-like. He was close to Donald Trump's number in the rural parts of this district. So that sort of fortified him. And then the ball game really came down to Delaware County. This is a big suburban county here. You know, we say suburban. It's more removed from Columbus, though, than those immediate suburbs in Franklin County. It's very wealthy. And you see Balderson, he won it. He didn't, by historical standards, what he got in Delaware County, he got 54% there. Not great for a Republican, but what Democrats were hoping was that in a place like Delaware, there was going to be even more slippage for Balderson. He'd be closer to 50. Hey, maybe he could even lose it. That kind of thinking. Didn't get anywhere near that. He did just enough there. So as a result, it looks like right now, recount pending, maybe, possibly, it looks like, though, Balderson may be headed to a victory there when this finally gets done. The other thing to keep in mind, though, as we say, is just the context of all this. This is the last one. It's over now, except for the potential recount, but that's the last special election before the midterms. They all started after the 2016 election. The first special election for Congress was in April of 2017. It was out around Wichita, and it started a pattern we have seen over and over again where you took a district. The first one we had, April 2017, Trump had won this district in Kansas by 27 points. They held the special election. The Republican won, but the Republican won by 20 points less, 20 points of movement away from that 2016 margin. We saw a double-digit change there in Montana. You saw double-digit in South Carolina, double-digit in Pennsylvania. That's the Conor Lamb one. Democrats won. Double-digit in Arizona, double-digit last night. Right now, it would be about a 1-point win for the Republicans at the current moment. We'll see where that ends up. There's a couple exceptions up here. Utah, I wouldn't even think much about that. The Trump vote in 16 is so weird there. Remember Evan McMullin, third-party candidate. It skews all of the comparisons when you start comparing 16 to 18. So really the one other exception was that race in the suburbs of Atlanta a little over a year ago. Republicans actually were happy with how they ended up there. That's the only bright spot, really, Republicans generated in the special election map. Otherwise, Democrats are looking at those double-digit gains off 16, and that certainly whets their appetite as they look ahead to the general election. We say, look, battle for the House. Think of this. We say the Democrats ran up the score in those suburbs. The Democrats ran up the score in the part of the district in Ohio 12 there that Hillary Clinton won in 16. Well, if you're a Republican in one of these districts, you got to look at that and you got to get nervous. There are 25 Republicans who are going to be running this fall in districts that are now held by Republicans, but that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. So those are voters who clearly don't like Donald Trump much. They gave the Republican candidate for Congress maybe some of the benefit of the doubt in 2016. In the 2018 midterm, though, boy, if you see what you just saw in that Franklin County portion of Ohio 12, then Republicans in a lot of these districts could be in a whole heap of trouble. Democrats, remember, they got to pick up 23 to take over the House. 23 is their magic number. There's 25 very ripe targets for them in Republicans sitting in those Hillary Clinton districts. You could go a layer out. How about, Republican-held seats that Trump won, but the margin was less than 5? You can add about 10 more right there. Hey, look, we've just shown you, more than well over 30 targets for Democrats. We haven't even gotten out to the level that Ohio 12 sits in, a Trump plus 11 district. I mean, you start looking 40, 50 seats maybe that for a variety of circumstances could be in play, and Democrats only needing 23. Democrats saw last night, if they wanted to win the thing, short of winning, Democrats got out last night the kind of, I think, sort of confirmation they were looking for heading into November. I think they're very optimistic today, and I think Republicans are very worried today about that, the ability of Republicans to hold that 23-seat majority. So that is the basics from Ohio. That's probably a lot more than the basics, too, but I kind of like talking when I stand in front of this thing, so I just kept blabbering there. But as promised, I'm going to turn it over and talk a little bit with our panel here to help me break all of this down as I walk over to the set and wait to get to the teleprompter that I can again read. We have Jess McIntosh, former Hillary Clinton campaign advisor, current executive editor at Share Blue, a progressive news website. Sir Michael Singleton, Republican strategist and contributor to The Hill and political reporter with Real Clear Politics. Caitlin Huey Burns, thanks to all of you for being with us. Jess, you're a Democrat. Are you looking at this today and saying, That's it. We got the House.
I am really pretty excited about it. I mean, we've been seeing some trends that make me very, very optimistic for November if Democrats continue to do the work of turning people out on the ground and our candidates continue to do the work of talking to the people whose votes they need. But since 2014, Democratic turnout is up 84%. Progressives have been losing the battle in terms of midterms for decades. Republicans have been eating our lunch in terms of having voters turn out when a president is not on the ballot. If we take the opportunity that Trump has presented this year to rectify that, that's the ball game for progressives. There are quite simply more of us. If we are capable of turning out, if we are capable of getting to the polls and supporting the candidates that we believe in, that is a complete game changer. And everything that I have seen so far suggests that people on the ground seem to be understanding that this year.
Sure, Michael, are you looking at that and saying 23 seats Republicans have to hold? That's really in danger right now?
I don't think it's possible. I mean, if you look at Ohio 12, for example, since 1920, this has been a pretty reliable Republican district, with the exception of 1930 for 8 years and 1980 for 2 years. Then in 2011, they gerrymandered the district, so it was even more slated for Republicans. And now all of a sudden you have O'Connor, a pretty unknown individual who is essentially within a statistical dead heat with a Republican. And I begin to wonder, as it relates to the president, his ability to turn out individuals may also encourage enthusiasm on the other side. And so I think for Republicans going into November, they have to question how much of Trump do we utilize versus risking increasing our turnout for Democrats.
So, I mean, so you're looking at this as a Republican, and you think the House is pretty good for going?
I think it's gone. I think history is on the side of Democrats, and I think there's a huge dislike and distrust of Donald Trump. Even NAACP, for example, released a poll Tuesday that showed African Americans, Latino Americans, and Asian Americans are extremely concerned with Trump, and they see him as rolling back policies as it relates to race relations. When you start looking at more competitive districts that are diverse, what does that mean for Republicans? It means almost a guaranteed loss.
So what I saw, one of the things I saw, Caitlin, looking at these results is the energy that Jess was talking about. It's clearly there. You can see it in these results. I did see in the rural parts of that district, we said Balderson got Trump-like numbers there, 70% or so in a lot of these rural counties. What he didn't get was the same kind of surge turnout you saw in the Democratic area. So the level of support was there, just not the level of turnout. It does make me think, hey, is there something that Republicans could do between now and November that would match that Trump level of support with like a Trump level of turnout and maybe equalize a little bit of what you saw there?
It's going to be very difficult. I mean, Republican campaigns, as we're getting into the home stretch of primaries and into actual general election campaigns, are trying to figure out how to utilize the president when and where, in what states, and it's all about, to use a real estate term, location, location, location. It's all going to depend on location. But I've been talking to a lot of Republican strategists who also say that Trump is not the kind of, one told me, a precision bomb that you can just put in one district and expect him to help that district, but not alienate others. That he has the more earthquake-like tendency to extend that kind of metaphor. So what's really interesting here is that Republicans certainly are claiming victory in Ohio, but the fact is that because it's so close, because there are somewhat 70 or so other districts that are less Republican than this one, or Hillary Clinton won, you heard a lot of Republicans, even from a fundraising perspective, the Congressional Leadership Fund, a very active super PAC in these elections, knows these races in and out, sounding the alarm bells that Democrats are overperforming in terms of fundraising against Republicans.
The other bigger thing that I think this points to in Ohio 12 is we talk so much about how Trump got the dynamics of the 2016 election, and what you saw in 2016 was this divide. We talk about it all the time, that sort of blue-collar, college-educated divide, and where Trump was not doing nearly as well as Republicans typically have done in the suburbs, but then suddenly he had explosive growth out in these rural areas, these small towns, especially sort of in the northern part, Midwest, northern part of the country. And I'm looking at this district, Jess, and I'm saying, I'm starting to think, certainly for the duration of the Trump presidency and maybe a lot longer beyond that, this is one of those new fault lines in American politics. The Republicans used to be the party of the suburbs. They're becoming the party of small town, rural America in the older, small cities. And Democrats are becoming the party of the suburbs.
Well, the Republican base is shrinking. What we're seeing since Trump's election is that some Republican stalwart voters, like white women, are starting to move to the Democratic Party. We have never won white women, and we are now starting to see white college-educated women, white unmarried women, moving towards the Democrats, probably because the president is a pretty unapologetic misogynist, but that's conjecture. They're now stuck with just white men. And that's not enough to win a majority in this country. We're a diversifying country. And it's not even all white men. It's certain segments of white men. It's rural white men. It's non-college white men. So once you're slicing one piece of the demographic pie that is America to make your wins, you're in a really bad place. I think that Trump's particular brand of conservatism is alienating a lot of people who would normally be happy to suck it up and vote for him because tax cuts. I think a lot of people can't stomach what his administration is doing and would otherwise be there.
Is the Republican Party now more a small town party, more rural, exurban?
I think so. I mean, when you talk to voters and even other Republican strategists, they all realize that a significant portion of Republicans who voted for Trump only did so because it was like, you know what, I don't want to vote for Hillary Clinton. I would just vote for Trump because I'm thinking about either the Supreme Court or I'm thinking about taxes and my small business. But since he's been in office, they're thinking, oh my God, I did not realize how much of a disaster this would be. I'm either going to vote for an independent candidate, I'm going to stay home, or I will just vote for the Democrat. This is something that I think is extremely problematic for the Republican Party, particularly to your point, Jess, the country's becoming more diverse. This is a losing strategy.
Does he have the ability? I'm wondering, though, is there something about the dynamic that's created by Donald Trump being an insult for everybody, all of that? We say, there was something unique about Hillary Clinton that got these voters to sort of hold their nose and vote for Donald Trump. Does Trump have the ability to make his next opponent the next Hillary Clinton to these voters?
That is certainly interesting. I mean, I think we haven't had yet seen any consequences, real consequences for Trump in terms of his behavior and in terms of the way that he has run his presidency, right? The midterms will help us determine that. But to your point about this kind of divide that we're seeing in the electorate, you are seeing the president and many Republican campaigns really leaning into these culture wars to appeal to that, even though, which is so fascinating to me because the economy is pretty good, at least on paper. They can run on the tax cuts, whether or not you agree or disagree with them. Instead, they're leaning into these other elements which they think will turn out their voters. And they're not thinking long term here, right? It's about winning this election and figuring it out later.
Taxes, it's not very popular. No. Remember in Pennsylvania, we canceled all of the campaign ads because all the data indicated, oh my God, this is like scaring people. This is not going to work. So what else is there to talk about beyond the Supreme Court? We kind of know that's a given. So at this point, I don't really see anything tangible for Republicans to really articulate to voters to say, beyond the chaos of Donald Trump, this is what else we can do to make lives better. And I think that's where Democrats have an advantage.
Look how he decided to start campaigning in Ohio. The day that he went to Ohio for Balderson, he opened up that day by insulting LeBron James. You would think that that is a really stupid strategy in Ohio because you're talking about a favorite son. But when you understand that his strategy is literally to play to this very narrow segment of a largely racist base, insulting the latest black athlete is exactly a part of that strategy, and that's what he's using.
Okay, Peanut Gallery. I'm calling you guys the Peanut Gallery because the script says to call. I hope that's not too insulting. Was the Peanut Gallery? I think it's okay. Anyway, you are going to be back with me in just a second, but I'm now going to get up and go back to the board because we got more we want to show you about. We talked about the House, we talked about Ohio 12, and we talked about what it means for that Democrats trying to pick off 23 Republican seats in the House. We want to take a look as well at the Senate. Oh, hey, look, they put the Senate up. So we're looking at right here what you see, blue. These are the Senate seats that Democrats are maybe potentially worried about. Right away, I can tell you we got Minnesota here. I'm not sure Minnesota even falls into that category. Earlier this year, it was kind of on the watch list when Franken resigned out there. Take Minnesota out of it. What have you got here? You got 10 states that all have one thing in common. There's Democratic senators, and Trump won them in 2016. These are Democrats in Trump states. So Democrats in playing defense here in these states. Meanwhile, as you can see, not nearly as much red on the map right. Whoa, this thing was loose. Hang on a second here. Not nearly as much red on the map here, but Republicans do have a few seats that they're trying to defend that may be vulnerable this year. So the name of the game for the Senate right now is Democrats need to get +1. They need to get, +2. They need to get a net gain of 2 seats, and that would put them into the majority on the Senate side. So that means they got to make some gains here in their very limited territory they have. That Tennessee, this was not expected at the start of the year to be much of a battleground on the Senate side, but Democrats have recruited a candidate. They're very excited about the former governor there, Phil Bredesen. The polls so far show him basically defying political gravity, maybe having a shot at that. Nevada, that is where Dean Heller, Republican running for re-election there, he's got a tough race on his hands. And then Arizona, this is where Jeff Flake is not running again. So Democrats have got to make gains there, and then they've got to defend as many. They love to defend all of them. Certainly, they don't want to lose more than maybe like one of these Trump states. Where are they in the most danger? I think they're in the most danger in North Dakota. I think Claire McCaskill in Missouri is in danger. I think Donnelly in Indiana is in danger. We haven't seen so far. Montana's on the watch list, but so far Tester not looking like he's in grave danger. Polls have showed him ahead by a high single-digit margin. Wisconsin is not looking that bad for Democrats right now. Michigan not looking that bad. Ohio not looking that bad. Pennsylvania. West Virginia to put on the list, but so far the polling has been favorable to Joe Manchin there. But hey, Trump won the state by 42. I'm never going to say that's in the bag for Manchin. And Florida looming as a wild card. Trump, barely won the state. He won it by a very small margin, but Rick Scott, the Republican governor, he's been doing well in the polls there. So Democrats, really, all these things I've circled, those are the ones looking the most competitive. They got to win most, if not all of those, if they want to have a shot at the Senate. And then, as we say, they got to pick these off. We can show you, this leads into the next major. Hey, we did a big election night last night, special election in Ohio. Well, guess what? You don't have to wait to November for the next one, the next big election night, because we got one coming up in 3 weeks, and it's in Arizona. It's the primary Democratic-Republican side for that Senate race out there, and we can show you some very interesting polling. Here's a question for Republicans. Jeff Flake, Republican, he's not running again. Who do you nominate? Well, McSally, that's the candidate, the established Congresswoman. That is the candidate the establishment of the Republican Party wants. That they say she's electable. That's what they think. She has got to fight off Kelly Ward. Remember Kelly Ward? She ran against John McCain. She challenged him in that primary back in 2016. Had some pretty rough things, I think, to say about him. Joe Arpaio, I don't think you need much of an introduction there. He is running. So the question here is, can McSally get through this primary? Republicans certainly think that's their only chance to hold this seat. But even then, even if they get McSally through the primary, take a look at this. How does she match up in a potential race against the Democrat? It's going to be Kyrsten Sinema, Democratic Congresswoman there. Well, right now, most recent polling, Sinema leading by 4 over McSally. Take a look. You put Ward in there. That lead explodes to 10 points for Sinema. So the idea that McSally's the electable Republican here, the poll agreeing with that, but just because she's the most electable of that group of 3 Republicans doesn't mean she's actually going to get elected if she's nominated. So there's, I think, Democrats, we looked at those Republican seats where they got the chance of picking them up in the Senate. I think Arizona looms as the top target for Democrats to get a pickup. So if they could get Arizona and they get Tennessee, that'd be 2. Then you can't afford a loss in one of those Trump states. Maybe you pick up Nevada. Maybe you got to balance these things. It is a tough path for Democrats, even if the midterm climate is great for them. And there have been a lot of indications things are looking pretty good for them nationally in terms of the climate. The Senate math is very hard for them. So that's the Senate side. August 28th. Mark your calendars for that one. We're going to be right back here counting the votes, watching them all come in. It'll be a very late night out there in Arizona. And meanwhile, we're going to head right back to the panel. And I am talking slowly because I'm waiting for that. I found the I could have introduced you without the teleprompter. It's like Anchorman. I could print anything in here and I'd start reading it, and then my career would end on the spot. But we are back with Jess McIntosh, Michael Singleton, and Caitlin Huey Burns. How important is the Senate to Democrats? I mean, if they get the House,
yeah.
How important does the Senate feel to you?
Honestly, it doesn't feel as important as the House. It doesn't have the same immediacy. I believe that the enthusiasm is with Democrats. I believe that the Senate map is horrible. The Senate map has always been horrible. In 2016, when I was on the Clinton campaign, we would talk about the need to win the Senate this year because there was zero chance that we could do it next year. None of the map has changed. But when you look race by race, like you were just doing, there's no one where I would switch places with the Republican. So while I don't think if Democrats take the Senate, we will have done something truly extraordinary this year. If we don't, but we do take the House, I don't think people are going to say, wow, that wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. So in that case, I don't think it's as important. But I think we have a chance when you go race by race like that and you consider how much time is left between now and November for things to be messed up on the other side. I don't want to write it off, even though I would, my 2016 self would be calling my 2018 self seriously naive.
Well, and this is the thing, when you go back to 2016, you look at that, but the alternate history here where Hillary Clinton gets elected in 2016, and Democrats have to defend all those seats I was just showing with Hillary Clinton, Republicans could be looking at 60 votes in the Senate in all those races. Instead,
there are maybe 1 to 2 seats that we could potentially pick up. I don't think there is a chance.
What are the top two? When you say 1 or 2, which ones do you think of when you say Republicans got a shot here?
I am looking at West Virginia. Why? Because that has been a reliable Trump
42
state.
points, yep.
I think with the right amount of targeting and mobilization on our side, we could potentially flip that seat from Joe Manchin. And another seat that I would look at would be Missouri.
Yeah.
Because Missouri, Trump won by over 500,000 votes, I believe 19% above Hillary Clinton. I think, again, with the right targeting and mobilization, we could potentially flip that seat. So those are two
already hacking Missouri, so the Republican playbook is full in effect.
Here's the thing about Missouri. We didn't show this result here a minute ago. They had this right to work referendum yesterday.
Me, Steve. Where did that come from?
Well, but here's the interesting thing. The Republicans made sure it was on the ballot in this summer primary. And not the November general election, because they said they went down to defeat. This was, this is a 2-to-1, almost a 2-to-1 defeat out there. And the Republicans looked at that and they said, well, you know what? If we rile up labor, if we lose big on this, if we get all these activists at the poll to vote against right to work, is that going to boost Claire McCaskill? Better put it on the ballot in the middle of the summer. And maybe McCaskill gets lucky in politics sometimes, but maybe,
She is the lucky. What's really interesting about Missouri is, remember, just a couple of months ago, we were talking about the scandal-plagued governor who everybody's forgotten his name by now, right? So it's things that happen today. It's so hard to predict exactly how they will be felt in certain states by Election Day. And I know that sounds a little bit cliche, but I think in this environment, it is moving so rapidly. You are seeing, however, that most Republican candidates in these Senate races see little downside, if any, to completely endearing themselves to Donald Trump. We're seeing that even in Arizona at this point. They're still in a primary, but you're seeing that in Indiana, Missouri, certainly, North Dakota, everywhere else. They want Trump to be there for him, and they want to be the Trump candidate. What's also interesting in terms of the Senate map, and even if Democrats don't win, I think it provides somewhat of a roadmap for 2020, right? So if they're able to take over, if they lose some seats in the Midwest, but also take over Arizona or Nevada, looks like a top pickup opportunity for Democrats on that side. You start to see the 2020 map shift a little bit in terms of where the target constituencies are.
And the other question here, I think, just we say 2020, the atmosphere, the climate of politics will change right after this November. Oh, absolutely. Right? The midterm election is always, every party's like, we're going to make this about a referendum on what we're trying to do. We're going to nationalize, equalize. It always ends up being a referendum on the president. And unless the president is at 70% in the polls for whatever reason, which we've seen a few times in history, they lose seats. And the question is just how bad is it going to be? It shifts, though, as soon as you get through that election. And it really does then become that choice between the two parties. The Democratic Party, I'm curious about this, that's emerging right now in the summer of 2018 from a year and a half going on 2 years of Donald Trump. Look, the Republican line on this, and I'm sure Michael can probably repeat it after I try to put it out there, but the Republican line is going to be the Democratic Party has moved far to the left, nominating socialist candidates, embracing identity politics. The Democratic Party has taken a narrow defeat in 2016 and has made its plight worse by moving very far to the left. What would you say to that?
I think from the results in 2017 and 2018, it's pretty obvious that that's not what's happened. What we've done is grown as a party. We are a different Democratic Party, and Democrats who want to run in 2020 would be doing the wrong thing to not acknowledge that. It is a new, larger, younger, more vibrant, more diverse Democratic Democratic Party than it ever has been. But I think that we're doing an excellent job. I mean, listening to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talk about democratic values, when we talk about universal health care and affordable tuition, these are not far left ideas. They are, in fact, tenets of the Democratic Party that go back decades and decades, a century. If we can stick to that, we can win. We can win on that messaging. And I think that it will be really nice to have a national party leader who we can turn to for that kind of like broader overarching messaging, because right now, of course, we are without it. But I do think our local candidates are doing a fantastic job of picking it up, and that's why we're seeing them be so successful.
Who is the Democrat Republicans want to run against?
I hope you guys put someone like Alexandria or Bernie Sanders to represent your party, because those far left politics will not work across America. They only work in utopic and cosmopolitan areas, but not in middle America, not in the South. And I think that's where you guys lose. That is the message Republicans will drive home to the American people. And you're guaranteeing a victory for Donald Trump in 2020.
By talking about healthcare and education.
Who's going to pay for this stuff? Have you not seen her interviews?
All right.
Free school, free
I'm not
education.
suggesting that Ocasio-Cortez run for president in 2020.
She's 28 years old,
Right.
so we got to wait 7 years unless they change the Constitution on that. Although the way things are changing in this world right now, who knows what will happen. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in out there, wherever you watched, and my thanks as well to Jess McIntosh, Michael Singleton, Caitlin Huey-Burns, and you can continue to follow the Ohio race. It's still too close to call, and all of the day's political headlines on NBCNews.com. You can follow us on Twitter at NBC News for continuing coverage. Thanks for tuning in.